The grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel sparkled under the extravagant chandeliers, casting a warm golden light across the sleek marble floors. Caroline Sinclair, a poised young woman with a sharp mind and a keen sense of style, stood amidst the glittering crowd, her heart racing from the pressures that surrounded her. Dressed in a stunning crimson gown that hugged her figure perfectly, she felt every inch the part of the successful entrepreneur her family expected her to be. Yet beneath her polished exterior, a storm of emotions brewed. "Caroline, dear, you simply must introduce me to some of your colleagues," her mother, Elizabeth Sinclair, urged, her voice dripping with the sort of insistence that only a mother could muster. Elizabeth was a vision of elegance herself, clad in a designer gown that seemed to shimmer with the same intensity as the diamonds around her neck. "Of course, mother," Caroline replied, trying to keep the annoyance from her voice. She glanced around the room, spotting familiar faces, all adorned in their finest attire, but her heart wasn't in the small talk and networking that dominated the evening. "But I really should check on the catering. I heard they were having some issues." "Catering?" Elizabeth scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "You're an executive, not a waitress. Focus on finding a suitable partner. You know how important it is for our family's reputation." Caroline felt her stomach twist at the implication. "I know, Mother. I just need a moment." With that, she excused herself, slipping away from the suffocating pressure of the gala, her mother's voice trailing behind her like an unwelcome shadow. As she stepped outside, the night air hit her like a refreshing wave, but the coolness did little to ease her turmoil. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, drenching the city in a shimmering veil. The sound of thunder rumbled in the distance, and the vibrant lights of the city reflected off the wet pavement, creating a surreal landscape. Caroline breathed in deeply, savoring the brief moment of solitude. She wandered aimlessly, her heels clicking against the sidewalk, the clamor of the gala fading into the background. The rain soaked through her dress, but she welcomed the sensation, feeling it wash away some of the expectations that weighed heavily upon her shoulders. She approached a nearby alley, seeking shelter from the downpour, when her eyes caught sight of a figure huddled against the wall. Julian Hart, a young man with tousled hair and a weary expression, sat curled up in the corner of the alley. His clothes were tattered, and his face bore the marks of hardship. Yet there was an undeniable spark in his eyes that held her attention. In that moment their gazes locked, and time seemed to freeze. "Hey," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. He shifted slightly, the light from a nearby street lamp illuminating his features. "You shouldn't be out here. It's dangerous." Caroline hesitated, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't quite understand. "I could say the same for you," she replied, taking a step closer. "What are you doing out here?" "Just trying to stay dry," he shrugged, a hint of a smile creeping onto his lips. "Not much luck with that, huh?" She chuckled softly, the sound surprising her. "No, not really. I was just at a gala, and I needed a break from everything." She gestured vaguely towards the hotel, feeling oddly vulnerable in this raw moment. "Gala, huh? Sounds fancy," Julian remarked, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. "What's it for?" "It's a charity event, supporting tech innovations for education," she explained, feeling the need to justify her presence there. "But it feels more like a competition for who can wear the most expensive outfit." "Yeah, I get that," he replied, leaning back against the wall, his demeanor relaxed despite the rain. "I used to go to a lot of parties like that. Before." He trailed off, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air between them. "What happened?" Caroline asked gently, intrigued by the hint of a story behind his eyes. Julian looked away, staring into the rain-soaked street. "Life happened, I guess. Lost my job, lost my place, and, well, here I am." He shrugged again, but she could see the pain lurking just beneath the surface. That's awful," she said softly, her heart aching for him. "I can't imagine what that must be like." "Yeah, it's not great," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of bitterness. "But it's not the end of the world, just a new chapter, I suppose." A moment of silence enveloped them, the rain pounding against the pavement like a distant heartbeat. Caroline felt a strange connection to this stranger, an inexplicable bond that transcended their vastly different worlds. "Do you play music?" she asked suddenly, recalling the way his eyes had lit up when he spoke earlier. Julian's expression shifted, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his face. "Yeah, I used to play in a band. We had dreams, you know, but things fell apart." He paused, looking at her with a mix of hope and hesitation. "Do you play? No, she admitted, feeling a bit self-conscious. I've always admired musicians, though. There's something so powerful about music. It's everything, he said, his voice growing earnest. It's how I express myself. But I've been too afraid to pick it up again since everything happened. I don't even know if I still have it in me. Caroline felt a stirring of determination within her. You should try. Maybe it could help you find your way back. Yeah? He mused, contemplating her words. Maybe. The two stood in the rain, two souls finding solace in each other's company, the storm around them becoming a backdrop to the connection blossoming in that cramped alley. In that moment, Caroline felt lighter, as if the burdens of her life had been momentarily lifted. This boy, this unexpected encounter, was a breath of fresh air in her carefully curated world. Thank you for talking to me, Julian said, breaking the silence. Most people wouldn't bother. Why wouldn't they? Caroline asked, genuinely curious. Guess they're too wrapped up in their own lives to see what's right in front of them, he replied, a hint of sadness in his tone. Maybe they just need a reminder, she suggested, a spark of inspiration igniting within her. Maybe, he echoed, a smile breaking through the gloom. As the rain continued to fall, Caroline felt a sense of exhilaration coursing through her veins. She had stepped away from the suffocating expectations of her life and found something real, something raw. In the heart of the storm, she had discovered a glimmer of hope. As rain poured down in relentless sheets, the streets of New York shimmered under the dim glow of streetlights. Caroline Sinclair, feeling suffocated by the expectations of her life, wandered aimlessly through the wet concrete jungle. The gala she had just attended felt like a world away, filled with chatter about mergers and marriages, all draped in designer dresses and tailored suits. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the importance of appearances and social standing. Caroline, darling, you must consider your options carefully. A good match, someone from a family like ours, will ensure you maintain the lifestyle we've built, Elizabeth had insisted, her tone both patronizing and concerned. Caroline had smiled politely, but inside, her heart felt heavy. She craved authenticity, a real connection, not just a calculated partnership. As she stepped into a narrow alley, seeking refuge from the storm, her eyes caught sight of a figure huddled against the cold brick wall. Julian Hart, a boy no older than 20, was curled up in a threadbare hoodie, his face partially obscured by the shadows. Their gazes locked for a fleeting moment, and Caroline felt an electric connection, something she had never experienced in the polished halls of her social circle. Hey, she said hesitantly, her voice barely audible over the rain. Are you all right? Julian looked up, surprise flickering in his deep-set eyes. I'm fine, he replied, though the tremor in his voice belied his words. Just trying to stay dry. Mind if I join you? I could use a break from the chaos, Caroline offered, her heart racing. Something about the boy's vulnerability drew her in. It felt like breathing in fresh air after being underwater for too long. He hesitated, eyeing her as if assessing her sincerity. Sure, I guess, he finally said, shifting slightly to make space beside him. Not much of a party out here, though. Caroline chuckled lightly, the sound mingling with the patter of rain. I'm not exactly here for a party. Just needed a moment away from everything. She paused, considering her next words. What about you? Are you waiting for someone? Not really, Julian replied, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. Just, trying to figure things out. What do you mean? She asked, genuinely curious. If you don't mind me asking. Julian hesitated, glancing down at his worn sneakers. I used to have dreams music, But things got complicated. He sighed, a sound full of resignation. It's hard to keep dreaming when you're just trying to survive. Music? Caroline echoed, intrigued. What kind of music? Rock. I used to play guitar in a band, he said, a hint of nostalgia creeping into his voice. We had some gigs, but then life happened. I lost everything. His eyes clouded over, and Caroline felt a pang of sympathy. I can't imagine what that's like, she said softly. But you're still here, right? That means you can start again. Easier said than done, he replied, a shadow passing over his features. It's hard to believe in second chances when the first one didn't work out. Caroline felt a tug at her heartstrings. She had been so focused on her own life, her own pressures, that she had never truly stopped to consider the struggles of others. What if I told you that I believe in second chances, she said, meeting his gaze with unwavering sincerity. What if I could help you find your way back to music? Julian's expression shifted, skepticism mingling with a flicker of hope. Why would you do that? I mean, you have your life figured out. Why would you want to get involved with someone like me? Because everyone deserves a shot at their dreams, she replied, her voice steady. And you seem like you have something worth sharing with the world. I want to help. A moment of silence stretched between them, the rain pattering rhythmically against the pavement. Julian looked at her, his brow furrowed in thought. You really mean it? You'd help me? Of course, Caroline said, her determination growing stronger. Let's start by getting you something warm to drink. Coffee? I could definitely use a coffee, he said, a small smile breaking through his earlier gloom. But I don't know how we'd manage that. I have a car nearby, she said, a spark of excitement igniting within her. Come on, let's go. As they stepped out of the alley and into the rain, Caroline felt a sense of exhilaration. Here she was, a woman from a privileged background, offering her hand to someone from an entirely different world. It felt right in a way she had never expected. They found a small cafe just a block away, its warm lights glowing invitingly against the dreary night. As they sat down with steaming cups in hand, Caroline watched as Julian took his first sip, the steam rising between them like the barriers they were both trying to break. This is amazing, he said, his eyes lighting up. I can't remember the last time I had a decent cup of coffee. Then let's make it a regular thing, Caroline suggested, her heart racing at the thought. Regular? Julian raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping back in. You mean like, you actually want to keep hanging out with me? Why not? Caroline replied, her smile widening. We can work on your music together, and you can teach me about your world. It could be fun. Julian chuckled softly, a sound that warmed her heart. You're serious, aren't you? Absolutely, she affirmed, leaning forward. Tell me more about your band. What was it called? The Lost Notes, he said, a hint of pride coloring his voice. We thought we were going to go places. We had some good songs, but then it all fell apart. Let's bring it back, Caroline said, her enthusiasm bubbling over. I'll help you find musicians. You can share your music with the world again. Julian stared at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. You really think we could do that? I know we can, she said, feeling a surge of determination. You have talent, Julian. Let's not waste it. As they talked and shared stories, the rain continued to fall outside. But within the warmth of the cafe, a new chapter was beginning for both of them. Caroline felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. And Julian, for the first time in a long while, felt seen and valued. I never thought I'd meet someone like you tonight, he admitted, his voice softer now. You're different from anyone I've ever known. Maybe we can learn from each other, Caroline suggested, her heart swelling with the possibilities that lay ahead. You can show me how to break free from my own expectations, and I can help you reclaim your music. I'd like that, Julian said, a shy smile creeping onto his lips. I really would. In that moment, amidst the steam and rain, a bond started to form between them. Fragile yet promising. Two souls from vastly different worlds, brought together by a chance encounter, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead together. Caroline Sinclair stood in her chic Manhattan apartment, gazing out at the rain-soaked streets below, the lights of the city reflecting like stars in a puddle. The gala had been an extravagant affair, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the incessant chatter of her affluent peers. Yet, amidst the glamour, she felt trapped like a bird in a gilded cage. Her mother, Elizabeth, had been relentless that evening, her eyes darting around the room, searching for suitable matches among the eligible bachelors who fit their family's social stature. Caroline, dear, Elizabeth had said, her voice melodic yet firm, you must consider your future. A good marriage is not just about love, it's about security, status. Look at the Harringtons, they're a perfect match for you. Chase has a promising career in finance. Caroline had smiled politely, but inside, she felt a storm brewing. As the evening wore on, the pressure mounted, and she had felt the walls closing in, suffocating her with expectations that felt foreign and heavy. The moment she had escaped the gala, the rain had greeted her like an old friend, a refreshing contrast to the stuffy atmosphere of the ballroom. She had stepped into the street, feeling liberated, until she stumbled upon the alley where Julian Hart was hiding. After their first conversation, Caroline found herself thinking about Julian more and more. He was a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the polished men she was surrounded by at events. Her heart raced as she recalled how his laughter had filled the alley, how his eyes had sparkled with dreams long forgotten. She knew she had to confide in someone, to share this peculiar connection she felt with him. And who better than Mia, her lifelong friend and confidant? The next day, Caroline met Mia at their favorite cafe. a cozy spot adorned with warm lighting and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Mia was already seated at their usual table, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders as she scrolled through her phone. When she looked up and saw Caroline, her face lit up. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost," Mia teased, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "What happened? Did you finally meet a prince?" Caroline chuckled but quickly shook her head. "Not exactly. I met someone different." Mia raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. "Different how? Spill it." Taking a deep breath, Caroline launched into the story. She told Mia about the gala, the pressures from her mother, and finally, how she had met Julian in the alley. "He's not like the guys I know, Mia. He's real. He has dreams, and he's been through so much." Mia leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands, listening intently. "What do you mean? What's his story?" Caroline hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "He's homeless, Mia. He's had a tough life, lost everything because of circumstances beyond his control. But he's passionate about music. He used to have a band." Mia's eyes widened. "Wow, that's intense. But Caroline, are you sure this is a good idea? I mean, your family." "Don't you think it's time I do something different?" Caroline interrupted, her voice rising slightly, fueled by a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "Everyone expects me to follow their path, to marry someone wealthy and stay within our circle. But I want to explore my own feelings. I want to know him better." Mia smiled, her expression softening. "I get it. You're breaking free, and I love that. But how do you think Julian will fit into your world?" "I don't know, but I want to try." Caroline's eyes sparkled with determination. "I want to introduce him to you. I think you'll understand him." Mia nodded, her enthusiasm building. "Absolutely. Let's meet him. I'll support you, whatever you decide. Just promise me one thing, don't lose yourself in this." Later that week, Caroline arranged to meet Julian again, this time inviting Mia along. They met at a small park, the sun peeking through the clouds, illuminating the vibrant greenery surrounding them. Caroline felt a rush of excitement and anxiety as she approached Julian, who was sitting on a bench, strumming his guitar, lost in his own world. "Julian!" she called, waving. He looked up, surprise evident on his face, quickly replaced by a warm smile. "Caroline, hey!" He stood up, his guitar resting against his leg. "Good to see you again." "This is my friend, Mia," Caroline said, gesturing towards Mia, who stood beside her, beaming with curiosity. "I thought you two should meet." "Nice to meet you, Mia," Julian said, extending his hand. "Hope Caroline hasn't scared you off with my sob story." Mia laughed, shaking his hand. "Not at all. I'm actually really intrigued. Caroline has told me a bit about you." "Only good things, I hope," Julian replied, his playful demeanor easing the tension. As they settled onto the bench, the three engaged in conversation, laughter punctuating their dialogue. Julian shared stories about his life, his love for music, and his dreams of reuniting with his band. Caroline watched, her heart swelling with admiration as she realized how genuine and talented he was. "Why did you stop pursuing music?" Mia asked, her voice filled with empathy. "You seem really passionate about it." Julian looked down, strumming absent-mindedly. "Life happened, I guess. I lost my family, my home. It felt like I lost my chance to chase those dreams. But I still love it." Caroline leaned closer, her eyes glowing with encouragement. "You should pick it back up. I believe in you, Julian. You have something special." "Thanks, Caroline. That means a lot." Julian glanced at her, a depth of gratitude in his gaze. "I just don't know where to start." "That's why we're here!" Mia exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "We can help. Caroline has a network of musicians she knows. We can help you find your band again." Julian's eyes widened, a flicker of hope igniting within him. "You'd really do that for me?" "Absolutely," Caroline chimed in, her heart racing. "We can brainstorm ideas. You deserve to have your music out there." As they continued to talk, the bond between them grew stronger. Caroline felt the weight of her family's expectations begin to lift, replaced by the thrill of new possibilities. She cherished the moments shared with Julian, the way he made her feel alive and free, a contrast to the suffocating life she'd been leading. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Mia turned to Caroline, a knowing smile on her face. "This is beautiful. You're doing something brave." Caroline smiled back, feeling a surge of confidence. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what I want." With Julian by her side, She felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The world was vast and full of opportunities, and for the first time in a long while, Caroline felt hopeful. She had found a connection that transcended the superficiality of her past, and she was willing to fight for it. As the rain poured relentlessly over New York City, Caroline Sinclair found herself drawn closer to Julian Hart, the boy she had met in that alley just a few nights ago. Their connection had sparked something within her that she had never anticipated. She could hardly believe how much he had opened up to her, sharing pieces of his life like a delicate mosaic. In the aftermath of their initial encounter, she felt a compulsion to learn more about him, to understand the depths of his dreams and the shadows of his past. One chilly evening, Caroline invited Julian to a small cafe in the West Village, a cozy spot tucked away from the bustling streets. The cafe had a rustic charm, with wooden beams overhead and the warm glow of string lights casting a soft ambiance. As they settled into a secluded corner, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped them. "Do you come here often?" Julian asked, glancing around with a hint of childlike wonder. He had always been more accustomed to the stark reality of survival than to the luxuries that Caroline often took for granted. "Not really," Caroline admitted, stirring her latte absent-mindedly. "But I thought it might be a nice escape from the chaos of my life." Julian raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Chaos? You mean with family pressure and all that?" Caroline sighed, her eyes reflecting a hint of frustration. "You have no idea. My mother is constantly pushing me to marry someone from our social circle. Someone who fits the mold. It's exhausting." "Wow, that sounds intense," Julian replied, leaning back in his chair, studying her. "But you don't have to live by their rules, you know?" She smiled, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "I wish it were that simple. But sometimes it feels like I'm trapped in a cage of expectations." Julian nodded thoughtfully, then shifted the topic. "What about you? What do you really want?" Caroline hesitated, her heart racing. I want to make a difference. I want to build something meaningful, something that helps people, not just climb the corporate ladder." Julian's eyes sparkled with interest. "That's amazing. You have the power to do that. I've always dreamed of being in a band, sharing my music with people. But life happened, and I lost that part of myself." "What kind of music?" Caroline asked, leaning in, captivated by the light that had ignited in Julian's eyes. "Rock, mostly," he said, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "I used to play guitar and sing. I had a band back in the day, but when everything fell apart, I let it go. I couldn't even think about it for a long time." "Why not start it again?" Caroline suggested, her enthusiasm bubbling to the surface. "You still can. You have so much talent, Julian." He looked down at his coffee, the warmth of her encouragement washing over him like a soothing balm. "It's not that easy. I don't have a place to practice, and I don't even know where to start. Plus, who would want to play with a guy like me?" "Stop that," Caroline interjected firmly, her eyes locking onto his. "You're not just a guy on the streets. You have a story, a voice. You deserve to chase your dreams." Julian studied her, feeling the sincerity in her words. "Maybe you're right, but I'm scared. What if I fail again?" "You won't know unless you try," Caroline said, her voice soft but resolute. "And I can help you. I can connect you with people who can play with you. We can make it happen." The idea took root in Julian's mind, blossoming into a mix of hope and doubt. "You'd really do that for me?" "Absolutely," Caroline replied, her heart swelling with determination. "Let's brainstorm some ideas. You could hold auditions or look for musicians online. We can even set up a little practice space." Julian couldn't help but smile, the warmth of her support wrapping around him like a comforting blanket. "You really believe in me, don't you?" "I do," she said earnestly. "You have so much potential, Julian. It's time to let it shine." That night, as they parted ways, Julian felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful about his future. Caroline's belief in him was like a beacon, guiding him through the darkness that had enveloped his life for too long. Over the next few weeks, Caroline dedicated her evenings to helping Julian. They scoured social media for musicians looking to collaborate, and she even reached out to some of her friends in the music industry. With each passing day, Julian's confidence grew, and he began to rediscover his passion for music. Caroline would often find him strumming his old guitar, the sound resonating with a vibrancy that filled her heart with joy. One evening, while they were practicing in a small, rented studio, Julian turned to Caroline, his fingers lightly brushing the strings. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," he said, his voice laced with disbelief. "It's just the beginning," Caroline smiled, her eyes sparkling. "You're going to be amazing, I know it." Julian chuckled, his cheeks flushing slightly. "I don't know about that. I still get nervous when I think about performing in front of people." "That's normal," Caroline assured him. "But remember, you're not alone in this. You have me, and you have the music." He nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. "You've changed my life, Caroline. I don't know how to thank you." "Just keep being you," she replied, her expression earnest, "and let your music speak for you." The studio sessions became a sanctuary for both of them. They spent hours honing Julian's songs, crafting lyrics that echoed his experiences and dreams. With each note, Caroline could see the transformation within him. The boy who had once felt lost was beginning to find his voice again. One afternoon, after a particularly productive session, Julian looked up from his guitar and said, "I've been thinking, what if we performed somewhere, just for fun to see how it feels?" Caroline's heart raced at the thought. "That's a fantastic idea. We could find an open mic night or a small venue. It would be a great way to gauge how people react to your music." "Yeah, but what if they don't like it?" he asked, the doubt creeping back into his voice. "That's okay," Caroline said, her tone light and encouraging. "What matters is that you're doing it. You're sharing your story. That's what makes music powerful." Julian took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling within him. "All right, let's do it. Let's find a place." As they continued to prepare for their first performance, Julian's excitement mingled with anxiety. He had come so far, yet the fear of failure still loomed over him like a dark cloud. But with Caroline by his side, he felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back to the music he loved. On the day of their performance, Caroline stood in the back of the small venue, her heart pounding with anticipation. The dim lights cast a warm glow over the audience as Julian took the stage, his guitar slung over his shoulder. She could see the nerves etched on his face, but there was also a spark of determination. "Hey everyone," he said, his voice slightly shaky but growing stronger with each word. "I'm Julian, and this is a song I wrote about. Well, about finding hope." As he began to play, Caroline watched in awe as Julian poured his heart into the music. Each note resonated with authenticity, and the audience was captivated. The fear that had once held him back melted away, replaced by an undeniable passion. When he finished, the room erupted into applause, and Caroline couldn't contain her excitement. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized that Julian had not only reclaimed his voice, but had also touched the hearts of those listening. In that moment, she knew they were not just creating music. They were creating a movement, a powerful anthem of resilience and love. As Julian stepped off the stage, breathless and exhilarated, Caroline rushed to him, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "You did it! You were amazing!" "I can't believe it," he said, his eyes wide with disbelief. "I really did it." "You were incredible. This is just the beginning, Julian. I'm so proud of you." They stood there, enveloped in the warmth of each other's presence, knowing that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The love that had blossomed between them was now intertwined with their shared dreams, and they were ready to embrace the future together. The evening was cloaked in opulence, the golden chandeliers of the grand ballroom casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed guests. Caroline Sinclair stood at the edge of the room, her heart racing as she adjusted the sleeve of her designer gown. The gala was her mother's annual charity event, a gathering of the city's elite, and Caroline could feel the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her like a heavy shroud. "Caroline, darling." Her mother's voice cut through the ambient chatter, sharp and demanding. Elizabeth Sinclair, impeccably dressed in a shimmering gown, approached her daughter with a look of determination. "You must mingle. Introduce yourself to some suitable gentleman. You know how important it is to maintain our family's reputation." Caroline forced a smile, her stomach churning at the thought of engaging in yet another hollow conversation about business ventures and social standings. "I will, Mother. Just give me a moment," she replied, her tone polite but lacking enthusiasm. Elizabeth narrowed her eyes, reading the reluctance in her daughter's voice. "A moment? No, dear. You need to take control of your life. You're not getting any younger. This is your chance to find someone who can elevate you, someone from our circle." Caroline's heart sank. Each year, the pressure mounted, and each year, She resisted the urge to conform to the societal mold her mother had carefully crafted for her. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite happy focusing on my career," she retorted, her voice steady yet tinged with frustration. "You'll be happy when you're settled down with a nice man," Elizabeth insisted, her tone leaving no room for argument. Caroline could feel the eyes of the guests on them, the whispers and judgments ready to pounce. She excused herself, her pulse quickening as she stepped outside onto the terrace, the cool night air hitting her like a wave of relief. The rain had started to fall, a steady drizzle that mirrored her tumultuous emotions. As she leaned against the wrought iron railing, staring out at the shimmering lights of the city below, her thoughts drifted to Julian. Their encounter had ignited something within her, something fierce and unyielding. But could she truly allow herself to embrace that connection amidst the chaos of her life? "Hey, you all right?" A voice broke through her reverie. Caroline turned to find Julian standing a few feet away, his hair damp from the rain, but his eyes shining with a warmth that made her heart skip a beat. "Julian, what are you doing here?" she asked, surprised and elated all at once. "I was just passing by, thought I'd check on you," he replied with a lopsided grin. "You looked like you needed a break from all that glamour." He gestured back to the gala, and Caroline couldn't help but chuckle. "It's a little overwhelming, to say the least," she admitted, stepping closer to him. "How have you been?" Julian shrugged, his expression shifting to something more serious. "Same old, you know. Just trying to figure things out. It's tough out here." The sincerity in his voice tugged at her heartstrings. She reached out and touched his arm gently. "You're not alone, Julian. I want to help you. I really do." Before he could respond, the doors to the gala swung open, and Caroline's mother stormed out, her face flushed with anger. "Caroline, what are you doing out here?" she snapped, her gaze landing on Julian with an unmistakable look of disdain. "And who is this person?" "Mom, this is Julian," Caroline introduced him, her voice firm. She could feel the tension crackling in the air. "He's a friend." "Friend? Oh, please," Elizabeth scoffed, her tone dripping with condescension. "You think it's appropriate to associate with someone like him? What will people think?" "Someone like him?" Caroline echoed incredulously, her pulse racing. "He's a person, Mom. Just because he doesn't fit your idea of a suitable match doesn't mean he's less worthy or valuable." Julian shifted uncomfortably, the warmth in his eyes dimming as he sensed the hostility. "I should go," he murmured, taking a step back. "No!" Caroline exclaimed, grabbing his hand instinctively. "You're not going anywhere. You deserve to be here just as much as anyone else." Elizabeth's eyes widened in disbelief, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find the right words. "Caroline, how can you not see the danger in this? This is not how our family operates." "What do you care about family when it comes to love?" Caroline shot back, her heart pounding in her ears. "This is real for me, Mom. You can't just dictate who I'm allowed to love." "Love? You think this is love?" Elizabeth's voice rose, drawing the attention of other gala attendees who began to glance their way. "This is a phase, an infatuation. You're blinded by your emotions, and you're making a fool of yourself." "Maybe it's you who's the fool," Caroline snapped, her voice steady despite the tumult raging inside her. "You've spent my entire life telling me to follow the rules, to play the part, but I refuse to do it anymore. I deserve to be happy, and Julian makes me happy." "Julian?" Elizabeth spat, her tone venomous. "A street kid with no future? You think he can provide for you? You're making a mistake that could ruin your entire life." "Mom, you don't even know him," Caroline shot back, her anger boiling over. "You've never even given him a chance. You only see the surface. Because I know what people will say. I know what they think." Elizabeth's voice echoed as she gestured to the gathering crowd. "You're risking everything, Caroline. Your career, your reputation. Don't throw it all away for a whim." Caroline took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "This isn't a whim. This is real, and I won't let you destroy it just because it doesn't align with your vision of my life. Julian is talented and kind, and I'm proud to know him." As silence fell between them, the tension crackled like electricity. Julian watched the exchange, torn between feeling protective of Caroline and ashamed of his circumstances. "I think I should—" "No!" Caroline interrupted, her voice fierce. "You deserve to stand here, Julian. You're not the one who should leave." The air was thick with unspoken emotions, and Elizabeth's face twisted in anger and disbelief. "You will regret this," she warned, her voice low and chilling. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." "Maybe you're the one who doesn't understand, Mom," Caroline retorted, her heart racing. I'm not going to live my life based on your fears or your expectations anymore. With that, Caroline turned back to Julian, her expression softening. I'm sorry you had to see that. My mother she doesn't understand. Julian looked at her, his eyes searching hers. Are you sure this is what you want? I don't want to be the reason you fight with her. Caroline squeezed his hand tighter, determination flooding her. I'm sure. I want you in my life, Julian, more than anything. As they stood together hand in hand, the world around them faded away. In that moment, nothing else mattered except the fierce connection they had forged, a bond that defied the expectations of society and the barriers of class. The atmosphere was thick with tension as Caroline and Julian stood across from each other in the small, dimly lit room of her upscale apartment. The remnants of their earlier laughter felt like a distant memory, now overshadowed by the heavy silence that enveloped them. Julian, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn jacket, avoided her gaze, staring instead at the polished wooden floor. Caroline could see the storm brewing behind his blue eyes, a mixture of hurt and confusion. Julian, please, she began, her voice trembling slightly. You have to understand. Understand what, Caroline? He interrupted, his tone sharp. That your life is perfect and I'm just some charity case to you? How can you sit there and pretend everything's fine when we both know it isn't? That's not what I meant, Caroline exclaimed, stepping closer, desperate to bridge the growing chasm between them. I love you. I care about you. You're not a charity case to me. You're a distraction? He cut her off again, his voice rising as the hurt spilled over. I'm just a momentary escape from your perfect little world, aren't I? You've got your fancy job, your beautiful home, and your mother's expectations suffocating you. And then there's me living in a box, trying to hold on to whatever scraps of a life I can find. Caroline's heart sank at his words. She had never seen him like this, so raw and vulnerable. No, Julian, it's not like that. I chose to be with you because I see you. I see who you are beyond everything else. He finally looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the conflict raging within him. You don't understand. I'm not good enough for you. I'm just a kid from the streets. I don't belong in your world. Why do you think that? Caroline's voice softened, her heart aching for him. You've shown me more heart and strength than anyone I know. You're not just a kid from the streets. You're an artist, a musician. You have dreams, Julian. Julian shook his head, a bitter smile forming on his lips. Dreams? What good are dreams when you can't even afford to chase them? I'm so tired of pretending everything is okay when it's not. You should be with someone who can give you the world, not someone who can barely get by. Caroline stepped back, feeling the sting of his words. I don't want someone who can give me the world, Julian. I want you. You're the one who makes me feel alive. But what about your family? Your mother hates me. You know she'll never accept me, and I can't be the reason you lose your family. You deserve better. Deserve better? She echoed, her frustration boiling over. Who are you to decide what I deserve? You don't get to make that choice for me. I'm not going to let my mother dictate my life or my happiness. Julian's expression softened for a moment, but he quickly hardened again. You don't understand. I'm not just some guy you can defy your mother for. I'm complicated, Caroline. I come with baggage. I'm broken. Then let me help you, she pleaded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Stole in her heart. As the door clicked shut, Caroline sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. She felt hollow, as though a piece of her had been ripped away. How could she let him go? How could he believe he wasn't worth fighting for? In that moment, she realized that she had never truly understood the depths of his pain, the weight of his past. And now, the very thought of him facing that darkness alone filled her with an unbearable sense of dread. She knew she had to fight for him, to show him that love was worth the risk, that he was worth the fight. But as the shadows of doubt crept in, she couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps she had already lost him for good. Caroline stood by her window, watching the rain cascade down the glass like 1,000 tiny waterfalls. Each droplet blurred the city lights outside, mirroring the turmoil inside her heart. It had been a week since Julian had walked out of her life, claiming it was for her own good. The ache in her chest was a constant reminder of his absence, and the weight of guilt pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had thought she could convince him to stay, but he had been resolute, convinced that their worlds were too different to coexist. Maybe it's for the best, she whispered to herself, though she didn't believe it. The truth was, she felt lost without him. The laughter they shared, the dreams they whispered to each other under the stars. Everything felt hollow now. She picked up her phone, contemplating whether to text him, but fear held her back. What if he didn't want to hear from her? What if he was happier without her? Suddenly her phone buzzed. It was Mia. "Hey, how are you holding up?" Caroline stared at the screen, her heart racing. She knew Mia was worried about her. "Not great. I miss Julian. A lot," she typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. "Have you thought about reaching out to him? You can't keep living like this." Taking a deep breath, Caroline replied, No, but what if he doesn't want to see me?" "Caroline, he cares about you. You have to try. Call him," Mia insisted. With a sigh, Caroline tossed her phone onto the couch. She wanted to call Julian, to hear his voice, but the fear of rejection was paralyzing. Just then, her phone buzzed again. It was Mia once more. "You're stronger than you think. Remember, love is worth fighting for." Caroline nodded to herself, her resolve strengthening. "You're right," she murmured, determination flooding her veins. She grabbed her phone and dialed Julian's number, her heart pounding with anticipation and dread. The phone rang and rang, each tone echoing her anxiety. Finally, it went to voicemail. "Julian, it's me, Caroline. I just wanted to hear your voice. I miss you so much. Please call me back." She hung up, disappointment washing over her. "Maybe he really doesn't want to talk," she said to the empty room, her voice barely a whisper. Days passed, and Caroline threw herself into her work, but nothing could fill the void Julian left behind. She felt like a ghost in her own life, drifting through meetings and phone calls without truly engaging. Her mother's expectations loomed over her like a dark cloud, but Caroline couldn't muster the energy to care. All she could think about was Julian. Then, one evening, as she was leaving the office, she received a call from Mia. "Caroline, I just heard something about Julian. He's in the hospital." The news hit her like a punch to the gut. "What? Why?" "I don't know all the details, but he got into a fight. Something about trying to reclaim his life or something." "I think it's bad," Mia said, her voice shaking. Caroline's heart raced. "I need to go to him." "Where is he?" Mia gave her the name of the hospital, and Caroline rushed out of the building, her mind racing with anxious thoughts. The rain had started again, but she didn't care. She hailed a cab, her heart pounding as she stared out the window, willing the driver to go faster. When she arrived at the hospital, the sterile smell and harsh fluorescent lights overwhelmed her senses. She approached the reception desk, her voice trembling as she asked for Julian Hart. I'm his girlfriend," she stammered. The nurse looked up from her computer. "He's in room 204. Please take a seat. The doctor will be in shortly." Caroline's legs felt like lead as she made her way to the room. She pushed the door open slowly, her breath catching in her throat when she saw Julian lying on the bed, his face bruised and bandaged. "Julian!" she gasped, rushing to his side. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and surprise. "Caroline." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm here. I heard what happened. Oh God, what did you do?" He tried to smile, but it turned into a grimace. "I thought I could handle it. I just wanted to show them I'm not a nobody." She took his hand in hers, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're so much more than that." Julian looked away, shame washing over his features. "I thought I could make things right. I wanted to get back on my feet, but I just made everything worse." Tears brimmed in Caroline's eyes. "You're not alone in this. I'm here for you. You don't have to fight these battles by yourself. I don't want to drag you down, Caroline. You deserve better than this," he said, a hint of desperation in his voice. Her heart ached at his words. "No, Julian, you're not a burden. I love you and I want to help you. Please let me in." At that moment, the doctor entered the room, interrupting their conversation. "Good evening. I'm Dr. Anderson. Julian, you've sustained some injuries, but you're going to be okay. We'll keep you here for a couple of days for observation." As the doctor explained the treatment plan, Caroline's mind was elsewhere, still processing the fear she felt when she saw Julian injured. When they were finally alone, a surge of emotion, fear, love, and a deep, overwhelming sense of responsibility. Sitting by his side, she reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. The warmth of his skin brought a moment of comfort amidst the chaos. "Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm here. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you." As if her words ignited a spark, Julian stirred slightly. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing the deep brown of his eyes, clouded with confusion. "Caroline," he croaked, his voice hoarse and strained. "I'm here," she said, her heart swelling with relief. "You're going to be okay. Just focus on getting better." He blinked several times, trying to process his surroundings. "What happened?" he murmured, his brow furrowing in pain. "You got into a fight," Caroline explained gently, her voice steady even as her heart raced. "You were trying to stand up for yourself and you got hurt. But you're in a safe place now. Just take it easy." Julian closed his eyes again, struggling to gather his thoughts. "I didn't want you to see me like this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like what?" she asked, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "You're still you. You're brave, and I admire you for fighting back." His expression darkened as he tried to sit up. "I don't want to be a burden to you, Caroline. I thought I could handle things on my own, but—" His voice trailed off, and he looked away, guilt washing over him. "Julian," she said firmly, squeezing his hand tighter, "you're not a burden. You're my partner. We're in this together, remember? You don't have to face anything alone anymore." He turned his gaze back to her, vulnerability etched across his face. "I don't know if I can live up to that. I've messed up so many times," he admitted, frustration lacing his voice. "And now I've put you in danger too." "Danger?" Caroline echoed, shaking her head. "You didn't put me in danger. I chose to be with you. I chose to care. That's my decision, and I won't regret it. But you have to promise me you'll let me help you." His eyes softened, and he nodded slowly. "I promise," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But there's something you need to know, something I've never told you." "What is it?" she asked, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and dread. Julian took a deep breath, wincing as he did so. "It's about my family. About why I ended up on the streets." Caroline leaned in closer, her heart aching for him. "You can tell me anything, Julian. I want to understand." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I came from a wealthy family. My dad was a big-time businessman, and we had everything we could ever want. But then, everything fell apart. My father got involved in some shady dealings. He lost everything in a scandal, and my parents' marriage fell apart. I was just a kid, but it felt like my whole world crumbled." Caroline's heart sank at the revelation. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, squeezing his hand tighter. "That must have been devastating." Julian nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "After that, we lost our house. I tried to keep things together, but my parents were too wrapped up in their own pain. I ended up on the streets, alone. I thought I could make it back, but every time I tried, I just got knocked down again." "Julian, you're not alone anymore," Caroline insisted, her voice firm. "We can figure this out together. You're stronger than you think." Just then, the door creaked open, and a man stepped into the room. Caroline's heart raced as she recognized him as Julian's father, a tall figure with a weary expression that mirrored Julian's. The resemblance was unmistakable, but there was a sadness in his eyes that spoke volumes. "Julian," the man said, his voice trembling as he approached the bed. "I came as soon as I heard. I'm so sorry for everything." Julian's eyes widened with shock and confusion. "Dad, what are you doing here? I had to see—" "You," he said, tears brimming in his eyes. "I've been trying to find you for so long. I thought you'd hate me for what happened, for the way things fell apart." "I don't hate you," Julian replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you left. You all left me." "I know," his father replied, his voice cracking with emotion. "And I'm sorry. I thought I could fix things, but I was too ashamed. I've been trying to make amends, but I never thought I'd find you like this." Caroline watched the exchange, feeling the weight of the situation. This was the moment Julian had never anticipated confronting the man who had abandoned him when he needed support most. She squeezed Julian's hand tighter, offering silent encouragement. "Do you want to talk?" she asked softly, glancing at Julian. "I can step outside if you need some space." "No," Julian said quickly, shaking his head. "I want you here." His father looked at Caroline, understanding her role in Julian's life. "Thank you for being here for him," he said sincerely. "I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm grateful." "I just want him to be okay," Caroline replied, her voice steady. "He deserves a chance." Julian's father nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I want that too. I've been working to turn my life around, and I want to make things right with you. I want to help you, Julian." Julian looked at his father, a whirlwind of emotions playing across his face. "Do you really mean it?" he asked, skepticism lacing his voice. "I do," his father replied earnestly. "I've made mistakes, but I want to be there for you now. I want to support you. Whatever you need." Caroline watched the two men, her heart aching for both of them. This was a pivotal moment, a chance for healing, for understanding, and for rebuilding their fractured relationship. She felt a sense of hope bloom within her chest. "Maybe I can help with that," she suggested, her voice strong. "We could start from here. We can work together to